This is VOA Africa. Hello, I'm Vincent McCory, sitting in for Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Friday, April the 23rd. Welcome to Africa 54. We continue to work remotely because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but what hasn't changed is our commitment to bringing you the latest and most important news from around the African continent and around the world. This is today's Africa 54. It's been nearly a year since George Floyd was killed by a former Minneapolis police officer who pressed his knee on Floyd's neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. Friends and family welcomed the conviction of Floyd's killer, Derek Chauvin, but continue to mourn his death. Esohe has more from Minneapolis.
Those who knew George Floyd intimately, like friend Tiffany Cofield, continue to mourn him even after the conviction of his killer, former police officer Derek Chauvin.
Like, a piece of my heart is gone. Like, I'm never going to get it back. Like, how do you replace somebody that's irreplaceable? And so it's hard to grieve when you're angry.
Those who knew Floyd describe him as a caring, community-oriented individual.
The love he showed to his community, to the youngsters, the ones he mentored. Like, people don't talk about that. You know, it's not the sensationalism, it's not the... But he was really a big-time community guy. Like, he knew all the senior citizens. He'd help them walk across the street. He'd carry their groceries. Like, he would do homework with his nieces and nephews.
And so, Tiffany Cofield believes Floyd would have loved George Floyd Square, the memorial created on the block in Minneapolis where he was killed. The neighborhood maintains the memorial, where free food is available for members of the community.
Hey, I get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, come up here, clean up all the paper all the way around here, put up boards on the window, take down the boards, whatever need, to be done up here. So that's exactly what I do.
Yeah.
Do you live?
Right now, I'm cooking and cleaning.
A lot of visitors also, of course, came to the memorial, but there's a group of people that they are caretaker of the memorial from the neighborhood who lived here for a long time.
No justice, no streets.
In the wake of the guilty verdict, Floyd's family and supporters are calling for change in America's policing system.
I'm very confident in saying that the family as a whole is definitely pushing for the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act to be passed by Congress.
For us here in Minneapolis, like as you heard today, there is a widespread, a full investigation about the MPD.
But Tiffany Cofield says there can be no true justice because Floyd's family will never be reunited with the man they knew and loved. Esohe, VOA News, Minneapolis.
The killing of George Floyd sparked Black Lives Matter protests around the world and demands for re-examination of injustice, racism, and colonial history. So how will the guilty verdict handed down this week against Floyd's murderer, Derek Chauvin, influence those global demands for change? Henry Ridgewell reports from London.
From the streets of Minneapolis, anger spread across the world and became a global force for change. So has the murder conviction against former police officer Derek Chauvin delivered justice.
It's a step in the right direction, but we must have real reform. You cannot reform racism. You can't reform white supremacy.
But eradicating racism that has its roots in centuries of colonial history remains the question. In Britain, statues became the target. This monument to slave trader Edward Colston torn down in the city of Bristol. Artist Helen Wilson-Rowe has replaced it with a portrait of George Floyd.
Even though this is a victory in America and for black people, for us, in regards to George Floyd having Derek Chauvin being convicted for the murder of another black brother, we've got a long way to go and we can't stop here.
Marvin Rees was elected Bristol's mayor in 2016, the first black person to hold the office in any major European city.
This kind of image, this narrative around black men being a threat and their lives being of less value within the criminal justice system in particular, but in society as a whole, is still with us. And how we get beyond that, as it's been built up over centuries, how we get beyond that is a huge challenge for us, and I don't think there are any easy answers.
Adama Traore died in French police custody in 2016, aged 24. Traore's family says he suffocated when he was pinned down by officers. The police strongly deny this. No one has been charged and investigations are ongoing. Protests erupted across France last year, demanding justice for George Floyd and Adama Traore. His family says there is one key difference.
Clearly, if there had been a video, the situation would have been different. There is no video. How many cases are there in France, in the world, where there is no video? What should we do with these dead, these victims?
In South Africa, many who live in black communities say police brutality is endemic, though not necessarily driven by race. Diversity activist Asanda Ngwasheng says the death of George Floyd resonated in a nation once under apartheid.
Globally, we feel the yoke of white supremacy. We feel the foot on our necks as Black people. And so when incidents like this happen, they amplify, they remind us that globally we have a common suffering as people of color in general. I'm hoping that as the United States reckons with its history of violence, it's going to mean less emboldenment of white supremacists in South Africa in particular, and I think globally as well.
Just as the pain of George Floyd's murder was felt around the world, there is shared hope that his tragic death may be a catalyst for change. A milestone on the long road to justice and equality. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
Doesn't mean black power, this means unity.
The United Nations Security Council expressed concern on Thursday about the humanitarian situation in Ethiopia's Tigray region, particularly abuse of women and girls. This comes a week after the UN aid chief said sexual violence was being used as a weapon of war. It was the first public statement by the 15-member council, which has been briefed 5 times privately on the conflict since fighting between Ethiopia's federal government troops and Tigray's former ruling party began in November. Chadian rebels said on Friday their command center was bombed on Wednesday night in an attempt to kill their leader as the nation gathered to pay homage to slain President Idris Deby, who was killed on the front line on Monday. The rebels have this month swept south across the desert from their bases in Libya towards Germana and say they are around 200 to 300 kilometers from the Chadian capital. They called a temporary ceasefire to allow Friday's funeral for Deby to take place. It is being attended by French President Emmanuel Macron, Guinean President Alpha Condé, and several other African heads of state. President Joe Biden kicked off a 2-day virtual global summit on climate with a pledge to substantially reduce U.S. carbon emissions by 2030 and double annual climate change funding to developing countries by 2024. 40 world leaders, as well as climate activists and representatives of international organizations, are attending the summit. VOA's White House correspondent Patsy Widakuswala reports.
As President Joe Biden convened the virtual climate summit of 40 world leaders, he made an ambitious commitment to cut U.S. carbon emissions by 50 to 52% below 2005 levels by 2030. The U.S. aims to lead again on tackling climate change following the Trump administration's withdrawal from the 2015 Paris Climate Accord. Biden's new target is double the commitment made by the Obama administration, and the hope is that other countries will also go further before the November UN Climate Change Conference in Glasgow.
The steps our countries take between now and Glasgow will set the world up for success to protect livelihoods around the world and keep global warming at a maximum of 1.5 degrees Celsius.
Some, including leaders of the European Union, Japan, and Canada, announced new targets, as well as Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro, often criticized for policies that speed up the deforestation of the Amazon.
I determined that our climate neutrality should be reached by 2050, moving up the previous announcement by 10 years.
But the world's largest CO2 emitter did not make a new pledge. China's rapid development means achieving carbon neutrality in such a short time frame will be a challenge, said President Xi Jinping.
China will strive to peak carbon dioxide emissions before 2030 and achieve carbon neutrality before 2060.
India, the world's third largest emitter, and Russia, the fourth largest, also made no new commitments. Meanwhile, developing countries sought new assurances on climate change financing from wealthy nations to help lower-income countries reduce emissions. These countries have historically contributed the least to global emissions, but often suffer the most from the devastating effects of climate change, said South African President Cyril Ramaphosa.
Consequently, developed economies, we hold a view, have a responsibility to support developing economies to enable them to mitigate and adapt to climate change.
In 2009, developed countries pledged to increase climate financing under the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change to at least $100 billion per year by 2020. The promise has not been met, but Biden said Thursday he is renewing America's commitment to the pledge.
The United States will double its 2024, by 2024, our annual public climate financing development to developing countries.
The president announced the creation of America's first ever international climate finance plan, laying out steps for federal agencies to increase funding to developing nations. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News.
Now, what can you make out of trash? Well, in Nigeria, 15-year-old Esohe Ozigbo is part of a group of youth that take part in community cleanups, tree planting programs, and trash-on shows in Lagos. Megan Revel of Reuters has this report.
Welcome to Lagos's Trash-on Show, where models strut down a catwalk wearing rubbish outfits. Literally. Their clothes are made from discarded plastic bags. The event is run by teenage eco-warriors, such as 15-year-old Esohe Ozigbo.
The Trash-on Show means a lot to me. I've been doing it for years, and it's like a way of showcasing to everyone what we can do with the trash we so carelessly discard. And I really think it's just like us making a statement and showing that we care about the environment, and you should too, because we're just teenagers, but we're trying to make a change in the world.
The environmental activists stage their shows in shopping malls, mixing fashion with advocacy in a bid to spread a green message. Plastic waste and litter is ubiquitous in Lagos, the commercial capital of Africa's most populous country, Nigeria. With more than 20 million people, the megacity generates 10,000 metric tons of waste every day. Ozigbo and her group participate in community cleanups, recently wading through a mass of plastic pollution that blocked a waterway. They're supported in their mission by Green Fingers Garden, a not-for-profit conservation group founded by Chinedu Mobo.
Together we went out, we picked up the plastic, we cleaned the environment, but rather than just taking everything maybe to a dumping site or so, we felt we'd get creative with it. So we decided to spruce things up and start the fashion show, the Trash-on Show.
Ozigbo says she hopes the shows make shoppers think about their actions and cites Swedish teenage climate activist Greta Thunberg as her inspiration.
Generation who are going to be leading in a few years, and the older people, at the end of the day, they will end up leaving this earth and we'll be the ones left with it. So we need to start now, because in a few years it's going to be too late to do anything.
That was Megan Revel of Reuters reporting. Cameroon's agricultural sector employs the majority of the country's workers, but most people know too little about the soil that provides their livelihoods. This leads to inefficient farming. To help Cameroon's farmers, a computer engineer created an electronic analysis kit to test soil quality and suitability for crops. And Nzoko in Edia has this report, narrated by Moki Edun Kinseka.
Cameroonian Rostand Simeu last year spent all his savings to start a plantain and banana plantation. But like all new farmers, he has struggled with efficient production.
We are already at 13 months old today. The bananas are still growing. The questions begin to arise.
Simeu heard about a Cameroonian company that helps farmers in remote areas to analyze their soil quality and to help choose crops. Technology startup Clinic Agro created a kit with a mobile application for instant soil testing. Founder Pyrus Kudjo says he invented the kit to help farmers who were losing money.
It's
very important for the farmer to be able to analyze his soil. Knowing your soil means being able to secure your investment, reduce the use of pesticides, reduce input costs, and improve productivity and agricultural profitability.
Most Cameroonians work in farming as agriculture is one of the main staples of the economy. But experts say many farmers are not trained to analyze soil for efficiency. Agronomist Rodrigue Ngono trains farmers. He says soil analysis is key to getting better results.
This leads us to have an approach that we're moving toward. In agriculture, it's called precision farming. It's about determining the exact amount of nutrients that a plant will need to provide in order for it to be produced most profitably.
For farmer Simeu, the clinic soil analysis shows his soil quality is poor and very acidic. The app recommends he switch to planting cucumbers, lettuce, eggplant, pineapple or cassava.
We do not intend to stop there, especially since we now have a partner, Clinic Agro, who is supporting us. With the new lands that you see, we are going to test new samples of land and then move on to other crops, something other than plantains.
Clinic Agro says in just 1 year since its creation, its mobile kit has tested soil quality for nearly 1,000 farms in Cameroon. For Anne Zwanke in Edeya, Moki, Edwin Kinzeka for VOA News.
Still to come, the music of Ugandan artist Crystal Panda. We'll be right back.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Linor Moudou, in Washington, every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
Welcome back to the show. The U.S. State Department has added at least 116 countries this week to its Level 4 Do Not Travel advisory list, putting the UK, Canada, France, Israel, Mexico, Germany, and others on that list, citing a very high level of COVID-19. Brian Wood of Reuters has more.
The United States this week added over 100 countries to its Level 4 Do Not Travel advisory list, including the UK, Canada, France, and Israel. On Monday, the State Department said it would expand that list to curb visits from about 80% of countries worldwide. Before Tuesday, only 34 countries were on the red list. Now it has 150. The recommendations are not mandatory and do not bar Americans from international travel. Other countries like Finland, Egypt, and Mexico were added to the Do Not Travel advisory, while others remained at a Level 3 recommendation of reconsider travel, like China and Japan. As for entering the country, Washington has already barred nearly all non-U.S. citizens if they've recently been in China, Brazil, Iran, South Africa, or most of Europe. And on Tuesday, the U.S. extended its restrictions on non-essential travel across the Canada and Mexico borders. The CDC said fully vaccinated people could travel safely within the U.S., but its director discouraged Americans from doing so, citing regional surges in cases.
That report by Brian Woods of Reuters. Now, around the world, more than 1 billion people live with some form of disability, and they are disproportionately at risk from the COVID-19 pandemic. VOA's Veronica Balderas Iglesias reports.
You okay, baby?
ELLIE Carney's loving bond with her Labrador retriever Olive has made the pandemic more bearable. ELLIE is 27 and has a disability.
Ever since COVID, Olive has been spending time with me. Like, I'm not depressed anymore.
With professional help, ELLIE has been living a mostly independent life for 3 years now. She's adjusted to the new normal, but her immune system is suppressed. So she's had to give up activities that might risk infection, says her mother.
When you have a disability, you really have to continue doing your independent living skills on a daily basis. And when COVID happened, ELLIE did regress.
I miss my friends, I miss being active, and I miss bowling.
In this pandemic, people like ELLIE face special risks. Their pre-existing health conditions make them vulnerable. They rely on others, and they are often forgotten.
And we all have needs. They're all things in life that are necessary for us, right? Food, shelter, clothing, in order to live a good quality of life. But people with disabilities have an extra set of needs. Each type of disability faces different types of barriers and supports.
At the Mary Marshall Assisted Living Residence, 70-year-old Muriel Crisler gets government-funded care 24/7. Restrictions are gradually being loosened after a year of measures to prevent COVID outbreaks.
They've opened up the dining room once a week. They have opened up the community room, and people go in there and talk and, do activities again.
While keeping the residents mostly isolated helped control infections, it took a psychological toll, says residence head Davina Alston.
70% of our residents are diagnosed with schizophrenia. Even though you can take medications, we saw an increase in residents having hallucinations and being depressed.
Advocates are documenting the problems both in the U.S. and around the world.
Persons with disabilities should be prioritized in accessing vaccination. So this unfortunately has not happened in most places of the world. Dependence on family members can cause and aggravate experiencing violence.
In the United States, some 61 million adults live with a disability. Many are in group living settings, and that has penalized them.
33% of the deaths have occurred in the congregate settings. It was completely predictable that these would be death traps for the seniors and people with disabilities. There was poor oversight. They knew that there was understaffing and inadequate training for the staff that was there.
The Biden administration has created a COVID-19 health equity task force to examine disparities in care.
The fact that we have physicians and nurses and psychologists and social workers who go through their credentialing process and don't really learn much about disability culture, disability etiquette, civil rights laws, accessibility is a problem because it affects the quality of the health care that people receive.
There's also a presidential proposal to spend $400 billion for more home or community-based care for people with disabilities. If Congress passes it, the support workers who help ELLIE and her mom will get a raise.
The DSPs get paid anywhere from $13 to $14 an hour. We really have to increase that number so that they can work 40-hour weeks and live off their salaries.
Money is important, but Mrs. Crisler believes more can be done to change the way people with disabilities are perceived and how they can succeed with just a little bit of help.
I'm as normal as any other person walking on the street. I have a mental illness. I take medication for it. It's treated. If I had two legs, I'd be living on out there in the world.
Verónica Valderas Iglesias for VOA News, Washington.
If there is any doubt that Ugandans can dance, this new clip from Kampala proudly proves they can. Music Time in Africa host Heather Maxwell speaks with musician and TV entertainment presenter Kitia Mwezi Herbert, better known as Crystal Panda, in Kampala, about his new video and the power of dance as opportunity for Ugandan youth.
and hear about you and, you know, a little bit more insight into your great music video.
Thank you so much. I can't thank you enough, but all I can say is may you be blessed in everything you do. I look out for the music right here. Always follow our music because you're the one who's supposed to push the music up right there. Thank you so much.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.